KirTop here, and these are 100 discoveries that changed human history forever. A mineral that no longer exists. This stone weighs only 1.6 carats, but its price is literally incalculable. Kyawhite is the rarest mineral on Earth. It was discovered by accident in Myanmar, in an ordinary market. Scientists have found out that its composition and crystal lattice are not found in nature anywhere else. At all. Not before, not after. The color is amber brown. The structure is like an alien object. Under the microscope, there are hollow tubes inside, formed by pressure and time. Today, Kyawhite is stored in a Los Angeles museum. This is not just a stone, it is a mistake of nature, and perhaps a trace of an ancient geological event that science has not yet even guessed about. But what if this mineral is not just an accident of nature, but something deeper? What if its composition hides the answer to questions that we have not even asked? Nazis and ancient giants. Among the many occult and pseudoscientific theories that the Nazis actively promoted through the Ahnenerbe organization, one of the most mysterious is the idea of the existence of ancient races of giants. The Nazis believed that these giants were the ancestors of the Aryans and possessed enormous physical strength, wisdom, and high technology. They were considered an example of the superiority of the Aryan race, which the Nazis sought to prove. The goal of the Ahnenerbe expedition to Tibet, South America, and Scandinavia was to find archaeological evidence of the existence of giants. These searches were part of a larger program aimed at finding artifacts that could reinforce the Nazi ideology of the purity and superiority of the Aryan race. There is a version that in some expeditions the remains of giant creatures were found: skeletons, skulls, and bones of enormous size. These finds were supposedly to be used in Nazi propaganda to support ancient myths about a great race from which they believed the Aryans originated. However, no reliable scientific evidence of these finds has ever been published, and much of the information about such expeditions remains at the level of legends and rumors. The idea of ancient giants fit well with the mythology on which the Nazi ideology was built, associated with the search for Aryan roots and the revival of ancient semi-mythical civilizations. Armor made of 6,000 scales. Archaeologists in China's Jiangxi province have made a surprising discovery. A scaly composite armor that is over 2,000 years old has been found in the tomb of Liu He, the Western Han Dynasty ruler Hai Hong. Not only does the find demonstrate the advanced craftsmanship of the Han Dynasty, but it is also completely different from the typical single-material armor of the time. According to a report from the Provincial Institute of Archaeology and Cultural Relics, the plates were made of lacquered iron, copper, and leather, with many measuring just 1 centimeter in width and 0.2 centimeters in thickness. The restoration took about 2 years, with experts assembling about 6,000 pieces found piled up in the tomb's armory, alongside swords and knives. According to Yan Jun, the leader of the excavation team, their arrangement and size demonstrate an incredible level of craftsmanship previously unknown in Han Dynasty armor. How was the brain removed before mummification? Who just did not tell about mummification in ancient Egypt? One of the most important moments in preparing the body for mummification was the extraction of the brain of the deceased. And in all the history textbooks and feature films, we were told that embalmers took out pieces of the brain through the nose. To confirm or refute this theory, archaeologists have to repeat a similar procedure in our time. This work was done by archaeologist and chemist from the University of York, Stephen Buckley. However, he did not conduct experiments on people, but on dead sheep. After several attempts to remove pieces of the brain from the head of a sheep, he came to the conclusion that it was very difficult to do this. To do this, it is easier to take a long hook and, like a blender, turn the brain into a liquid. It takes about 20 minutes to beat the brain, after which it can simply be poured. It all sounds gross and disgusting. However, thanks to such experiments, we can learn how certain processes took place thousands of years ago. And trust me, that's not the scariest thing scientists have to do. Interestingly, during the embalming, the priest did not always remove the brain. During the 18th dynasty and earlier, the brain remained inside the mummy. In addition to mummies, we remember ancient Egypt for its amazing drawings in the tombs. Road through ash. southern Italy. During the laying of a gas pipeline, a routine job, an excavator catches something strange. Under a thin layer of volcanic ash are the prints of bare feet, human, and nearby, hooves. Archaeologists rush to the site and realize in front of them is the scene of an ancient flight. People, women, children, cattle, all left their homes in a hurry. But this is not Pompeii, not 79 AD. These traces are 1,800 years older. Around 1995 BC, the time of the so-called Avelian eruption, one of the most destructive cataclysms of the Bronze Age. Before that, it was believed that almost nothing was known about it. Now, we literally see the rout of people trying to save themselves. Their last choice, imprinted in solidified ash. Surprisingly, centuries later, people settled in the same place again. Archaeologists have found remains of settlements dating back to 1200, 900 BC, and even Roman buildings. The cycle repeated itself. First an eruption, then a return, as if the earth itself would not let us forget. This is not just a story of a catastrophe, it is about repeated mistakes, about the stubbornness of human hope, about a memory that, like ashes, remains underfoot. The secret language of the Ice Age. Rock paintings around the world archaeologists and scientists are still studying. They always want to see something that hasn't been seen before. And now researchers have found unique marks on the rock paintings. It is believed that these were not just chaotic marks, but the birth of a real language that people spoke during the Ice Age. In fact, hunter-gatherers from the Ice Age were capable of much more than just drawing animals on rocks. In their drawings, they showed not just the animals that surrounded them, but also recorded detailed information about their lives. These drawings are over 20,000 years old. For a long time, researchers believed that their meaning is much deeper than archaeologists previously thought. Often new discoveries are made by random people, and so it was now. The usual furniture restorer and amateur archaeologist came to the conclusion that the markings on the cave paintings indicated the life cycles of animals. At first glance, the random dots and stripes may appear to be part of the design, but Bacon argues that they reveal the record of information and links to the calendar, and take the form of a kind of writing. There are sequences of markings next to images of reindeer, wild horses, fish, and bison. Scientists compared the birth cycles of modern animals, took them as a standard, and found a certain pattern. With these symbols, people of the Upper Paleo period communicated with each other while writing. It is still impossible for us to understand exactly how their words or sounds sounded, but it can be said for sure that the combination of these symbols denoted events regarding animals, perhaps the periods of their mating or birth. It looks like some kind of instruction for zoologists or a farmer. Every person from that time understood in what period of time the mating of horses or the birth of the offspring of the reindeer takes place. For many, this may seem like an insignificant discovery in the field of archaeology, but in fact we can finally understand when the first writing began to appear on our planet. Ancient people were not nearly as stupid as we are told in history books. The first mammoth that could come back. The permafrost of Yakutia has preserved the body of a mammoth, which looks like it was pulled out of a refrigerator. Yucca is not just a mummified corpse. It has preserved its brain, soft tissue, glands, and most importantly, living cell nuclei. Scientists have already conducted the first experiments. They introduced nuclei into a mouse cell, and it showed signs of activity. So far, without division, but this is only the beginning. Cloning is being seriously discussed, and if technology succeeds, the mammoth could become the first species to return from extinction. It sounds like science fiction, but it is no longer science fiction. This is a working laboratory. Laser weapons of the Third Reich. During World War II, Germany was actively looking for ways to create a fundamentally new weapon that could turn the tide of the war. According to some sources, the Nazis were working on prototypes of laser installations. These developments were carried out within the framework of several secret projects, including research in the field of optics and high energies. One of these projects could be the creation of the so-called beam weapon or death ray. Research in this area was based on the advanced achievements of German scientists such as Werner Heisenberg, who studied the possibilities of using lasers for military purposes. In theory, such a weapon could destroy aircraft, tanks, and other equipment at a considerable distance using focused beams of energy. The technological level of that time did not allow for the full implementation of such projects, and after the war, most of this research remained only on paper. However, every year archaeologists find various artifacts and documents related to the Nazis, and what previously seemed like a legend, in fact, turned out to be the terrible truth. Features of the Antikythera mechanism. In the depths of the sea off the island of Antikythera in 1901, a group of Greek divers encountered one of the most mysterious finds in the history of archaeology. They discovered a sunken ship that was carrying treasures from the ancient world, including statues, jewelry, and most strikingly, a complex piece of machinery that had been oxidized and littered with sea sediment. This object, which became known as the Antikythera mechanism, is shrouded in the mysteries of the past and is the subject of much research today. The mechanism, made of bronze, is a complex system of gears and levers consisting of 30 mechanical components housed in a wooden frame. The structure of the mechanism testifies to the high level of knowledge and technical skills of its creators. This artifact demonstrates an amazing mastery of metalworking and knowledge of astronomy. 3D scanning and X-ray tomography allowed scientists to delve deeper into the structure of the mechanism and understand its operation. These methods made it possible to examine every detail of the device without the risk of damaging it. Thanks to these technologies, it was discovered that the mechanism includes a series of gears capable of predicting the astronomical positions and ephemeris of the Sun, Moon, as well as other planets in the solar system. The main function of the Antikythera mechanism was astronomical modeling. The device was used to calculate and predict solar and lunar eclipses, as well as to determine the phases of the Moon and possibly the positions of the planets. This discovery greatly expanded the understanding of how advanced technology and scientific knowledge were in ancient Greece, confirming their ability to create complex computing devices many centuries before the invention of digital computers. However, many mysteries of the Antikythera mechanism remain unsolved. For example, the exact purpose of some components and scales, as well as the entire list of its functions, are not fully understood. In addition, it remains unclear who exactly created this mechanism and whether other similar devices were created that could provide additional clues about the technological advances of the era. The Antikythera mechanism remains a symbol of ancient Greek engineering, a reminder that the history of technology and science is still full of unexplored pages. Life outside the arena. When we think of gladiators, we immediately imagine a vivid picture of arena fights where blood, death, and glory merge into one sinister spectacle. However, this is only a small part of what these fighters did. In reality, their lives were much more complex and varied. In addition to training and fighting, gladiators served in a variety of roles, from bodyguards to mercenaries and even tax collectors. And of course, there were special privileges because free gladiators became real stars of Rome. They were respected and appreciated for their strength, courage, and discipline, and many of them became heroes for the citizens to whom they brought glory and perpetuated the traditions of the brutal arena. But there is another side to their lives. Many gladiators used their popularity to get jobs in influential families, hired as bodyguards, and sometimes even rose to the level of political figures, managing tax collection. Their lives were not only a struggle for survival, but also a game of power and wealth. And so with each passing year, the Greeks and Romans began to understand more and more that a real gladiator could be more than just a warrior, but someone who knew how to survive and thrive despite all the dangers. Wooden wishing well. On the territory of Bavaria in Germany, archaeologists have found the remains of a well-preserved wooden well. People used it as early as the Bronze Age, however. They used it differently than they do today. Researchers have found many ritual offerings, jewelry, and remains of pottery. In ancient times, our ancestors could use the well in the same way as we throw coins into the water for good luck. The area of today's town of Germering in Upper Bavaria uses to be an ancient settlement. This is confirmed by multiple finds in this region. In the excavations covering an area of about 7 hectares, many buildings and artifacts from the Bronze Age to the early Middle Ages were found. Many wells were found here from where people extracted water, but one well was unusual. This well is more than 3,000 years old. It is located at a height of 5 meters and its depth is much greater than others. It rarely happens when a well is preserved for 3,000 years. The wooden walls of the well were preserved at the bottom, although they were slightly damp from groundwater. Archaeologists found here 26 bronze pins for clothes, a bracelet, 2 metal spirals, an animal tooth, amber beads, and more than 70 ceramic vessels. Such filling fundamentally distinguishes this well from the rest at the excavation site. The condition of these objects indicates that they were not just thrown into the well, but lowered smoothly and carefully. Even now, in fountains around the world, you can find many artifacts and coins that people throw for good luck or to return to this place. Such is human psychology. It is easier for us to believe in all kinds of superstitions and luck than to start doing something. So people believed many thousands of years ago when they threw their jewelry into the well and made wishes. Butter in the swamps. Wetlands often become a treasure trove for archaeologists due to their conservation properties. The humic acid in peat bogs creates a pH level similar to vinegar, allowing items to be preserved for hundreds or even thousands of years. The Irish and Scottish marshes are especially famous, where butter is often found. To date, about 500 similar finds have been recorded, dating back to the 17th century. Similar finds are also found in Norway, the Netherlands, and Germany. Butter is usually found in wooden barrels, buckets, baskets, and cups. Sometimes it is wrapped in birch bark and cloth, but a third of the finds have no packaging. The weight of the finds varies from 150 grams to 50 kilograms. The oldest Irish find dates back to 1745 to 1635 BC, and the Scottish ones date back to the 3 RD2 and centuries BC. The reasons for storing butter in swamps are varied. One version is long-term storage. Archaeologist Daniel K. Fisher found that meat stored in peat bogs retained its freezer-like properties. Butter could also be used as currency for exchange, taxes, or rent. Another reason could be fermentation to improve taste. Nordic Food Lab experiments showed that butter stored in peat acquired unique flavors and remained edible after a year and a half. Icy ruins under snow. We are used to thinking of the Arctic as a place where only icy emptiness reigns, lifeless, empty, devoid of traces of civilization. But what if this is not so? What if under the thickness of glaciers there are not just traces of long-vanished peoples, but entire lost cities? Satellite research in recent years has led to the discovery of anomalous forms under the ice crust, which may indicate ancient ruins hidden deep in the depths of the north. These cities, according to some scientists, may be much older than the earliest of the civilizations known to us. Mesopotamia, Egypt, ancient India, all these peoples could have been simply a continuation of something greater and more mysterious than we can imagine. How is this possible? How could it happen that such cities are hidden under a multi-kilometer layer of ice? Today, these anomalies are at the level of hypotheses, but each new study only strengthens the mystery. Satellite images taken in the most remote corners of the planet show strange shapes and lines that resemble the structure of buildings, streets, and even entire cities. And if these hypotheses are confirmed, what if these glaciers are not just barriers but burial grounds of ancient civilizations? Ice caps that hide not only climate change but also forgotten epics of humanity. Surprisingly, perhaps these cities were victims of global catastrophes that preceded the ice ages. After all, is there anything more ancient than what is preserved by eternal ice? This question excites scientists more than ever. And perhaps if we unravel the mystery hidden under centuries-old ice, we will revise not only the history of our civilizations, but also the very understanding of how our world developed. Cloning Lab. A truly shocking discovery has been made in the Carpathian Mountains of Romania, an abandoned laboratory that is rumored to have been used by the Nazis for cloning experiments. This secret facility, hidden deep in the mountains, remained unknown for a long time, but recent excavations have uncovered fragments of equipment, containers for storing biological samples, and journals with scientists' notes. This lab could have been part of a larger Third Reich program aimed at creating the perfect man. The Nazis were keenly interested in genetics and biology in order to create a race of ideal soldiers. Strong, resilient, and completely obedient. The discovery of the lab in the Carpathians lends credence to these rumors. The equipment found includes bioreactors, life support devices, and glass containers that were likely used to store biological materials and tissue samples. Some of the containers contain traces of substances that may have been used for genetic manipulation. The documents found here describe experiments in animal cloning, specifically attempts to duplicate genetic material to create identical organisms. Some records indicate ambitions to create not only copies of animals, but also to reproduce genetically enhanced humans. In addition, traces of experiments in the accelerated development of cells and organs were found, which may indicate attempts to artificially grow body parts. These studies, if they were indeed conducted on living creatures, indicate the extremes to which the Nazis resorted in their scientific research. The laboratory was suddenly abandoned in the last months of the war when the Nazis began to retreat from the region. Many documents were destroyed, but the surviving fragments make it clear that the work was carried out at an extremely high level for its time. There is now an official ban on the study of cloning throughout the world. However, there is evidence that similar experiments are still being carried out today in China, the United States, Great Britain, and Israel. Ancient underground city. Scientists and historians constantly tell something new about the ancient city of Derinkuyu. It was home to early Christians who were hiding from the Romans and Muslim Arabs who sought refuge from the Arab-Byzantine wars. During the overhaul of the house, the builders destroy the walls and, of course, they do not find anything behind them. However, the incident that occurred in Turkey surprised millions of people. A resident of one house broke the walls in the basement and found a multi-level underground city behind one wall. Archaeologists believe that up to 20,000 people lived there. The man lived in this house for several decades and did not even realize that behind one of the walls was a city in the rock, where people lived in the 8th to 7th centuries BC. This city has many tunnels and secret labyrinths. Even local residents could get lost here, and what can we even say about uninvited guests? Many passages had huge stone doors that closed from the inside and blocked the passage. When archaeologists call this place a city, they are not exaggerating a bit. There were wells up to 55 meters deep, water channels, ventilation. All conditions have been created so that people do not rise to the surface for a long time. The total area of this giant structure is 276 square kilometers. With a total of 18 floors in Derinkuyu City, this place was very busy. In addition to what looked like apartments, there were schools, prayer houses, and meeting places. Animals were raised as close to the surface as possible to make the smell from cattle come out faster. For the first time, a mysterious and unique city was discovered more than 60 years ago, and archaeologists are still conducting their research here. Scientists have discovered some fragments of history already this year. Let's move from ancient Turkey to Egypt, where scientists continue to study mummies. Entrance to an underground ecosystem. In the center of Vietnam, there is a place where even science has not yet reached. Son Doong Cave is the largest on Earth, more than 6 kilometers long. Volume, 38 million cubic meters. To understand the scale, a block of skyscrapers would easily fit inside. But the main thing is not the size. The main thing is that inside this cave lives a separate ecosystem. Its own river, lakes, jungle, stalactites, tens of meters long, plants, insects, microorganisms, many of them perhaps are unknown to science. Light does not penetrate there. The air is its own. Humidity, temperature, pressure, everything is closed inside, as if the planet decided to create its own reserve outside of history. And interestingly, we still do not know where this cave ends. The endpoint has not been explored. Perhaps further on there is another hall, another biosphere bubble, or even a separate evolutionary path that went parallel to ours. A mystery in the Amazon jungle. Padre Carlos Crespi Croce, an Italian missionary who spent most of his life serving in Ecuador, became one of the most enigmatic figures of the 20th century thanks to his extraordinary collection of artifacts. Working with the Shuar tribes in the Ecuadorian jungle, he acquired many ancient objects that some researchers believed could be evidence of an ancient, highly advanced civilization, and perhaps even contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. Crespi's collection included strange metal plates engraved with symbols reminiscent of ancient writing, figurines depicting creatures with unusual features, and objects that many described as technologically sophisticated. Of particular intrigue were metal reliefs depicting creatures with elongated skulls, stars, and scenes reminiscent of space travel. Interestingly, there were no known civilizations in the region that could produce such complex items. Rumors about the collection spread after some visitors, including researchers, claimed to see evidence of extraterrestrial influence in it. Some of the artifacts were said to be made of metals that could not be identified. Crespi, however, was not looking for fame. He claimed to accept these items from local tribes in exchange for aid and food. The collection's connection to extraterrestrial civilizations becomes even more interesting when considering the mystery of the tunnels beneath Ecuador that are the subject of legend. The tunnels, known as the Teos system, are said to contain a library of metal books. Some theorists suggest that these tunnels were a base for an ancient race, possibly of extraterrestrial origin. The Crespi collection could have been part of these treasures. Unfortunately, after the death of Padre Crespi in 1982, the collection was destroyed by fire or stolen, and its fate remains unclear. What do you think? Could a missionary become the custodian of traces of an ancient space civilization hidden in the Amazon jungle? Realistic drawings of birds in ancient Egypt. When we evaluate the art of ancient civilizations, we are most often very biased. We admire the drawings of those times because we take into account that art was not so developed at that time, the conditions for drawing were completely different, and the masters did not graduate from art universities. If you objectively evaluate ancient drawings and modern ones, then modern ones look much more realistic and beautiful. But in our case, drawings from ancient Egypt surprised scientists. Archaeologists have studied the drawing of an ancient artist who depicted birds flying and sitting in a green swamp on a fresco. The image is so detailed that modern experts have been able to identify the bird species that inspired the artist 3,300 years ago. It was this picture that archaeologists discovered more than 100 years ago, and it has long been studied, documented, and attracts tourists from all over the world. However, only now scientists have decided to study the image of birds in more detail. Rock pigeons, lesser piebald kingfisher, Cerilla rudis, common shrike, Lanius colurio, and white wagtail, Motacilla alba, are present in the picture. Today, the room in which the drawing was found is called the Green Room. Most likely, it was intended for the royal family so that they could relax there. In ancient times, most likely, in addition to images of birds and flowers, the room was decorated with live plants and live music played there. When the frescoes were first discovered, they were very fragile, and it is good that the experts managed to create copies of them in the form of a drawing. At the moment, they are completely destroyed. The rock dove and the pied kingfisher can still be found in Egypt all year round, but the white wagtail and the common shrike are migratory birds. Ancient artists marked the shrike and wagtail with triangular markings on the tail, which birds do not have in real life. The researchers speculated that the artist may have painted these marks to indicate that both bird species only visited Egypt seasonally. Under the temple where it all began. Jerusalem, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, one of the most revered places in the Christian world. It is believed that this is where Jesus was buried, but for a long time archaeologists argued, to what extent does this correspond to the biblical description? Everything changed when scientists from the University of Rome began digging under the floor of the temple. They found not a tomb, not an artifact, but the remains of an ancient garden. Layers of earth between stone walls, traces of terraces and a cultural layer, and most importantly, pollen from grapes and olive trees. All this corresponds to the text from the Gospel of John. In the place where he was crucified, there was a garden. If radiocarbon dating confirms the age of the find, this will be the first direct archaeological confirmation from the text of the New Testament. That's right, not theological, not symbolic, physical. In addition, during the excavations, they found an ancient marble altar that disappeared during a fire in the 19th century. It stood in the temple all this time. It was just turned to the wall. On the front side, graffiti from tourists. On the back, a unique mosaic made in a technique that only Vatican masters knew. No sensations, no mysticism, only facts. But sometimes they speak louder than any legends. Yamashidas gold. One of the most fascinating and mysterious stories associated with World War II is the legend of Yamashida's gold. This story begins with Japanese General Tomoyuki Yamashita, who, according to numerous accounts, was able to amass vast treasures captured during Japanese military campaigns throughout Southeast Asia. Legends claim that at the end of the war, foreseeing inevitable defeat, Yamashita and his subordinates hid these treasures in various places in the Philippines. Since then, Yamashida's gold has been the subject of numerous expeditions and searches, attracting treasure hunters, historians, and adventurers from all over the world. But no expedition has so far been able to find definitive evidence of the existence of these treasures. The legend of Yamashida's gold was surrounded by layers of myths and speculation. It is said that among the hidden wealth were not only gold and precious stones, but also artifacts of incredible historical and cultural value. According to one version, the Japanese command used a complex system of codes and maps to designate the locations of the treasures, many of which were lost or destroyed in the last days of the war. In attempts to unravel the mystery of Yamashida's gold, dozens of expeditions were undertaken, some of which ended in tragedies and even deaths. This highlights the dangers of treasure hunting and the difficulty of searching in the jungle and mountainous regions of the Philippines. The story of Yamashida's gold continues to inspire new generations of explorers. It reminds us that many secrets of the Second World War are still unrevealed. And who knows, maybe one day someone will be able to solve the mystery and discover the lost treasures. Thou shalt not steal, but they did. In the quiet English village of Little Steeping, someone broke into a church at night. They took away several ancient Victorian frescoes, and among them was the most ironic of all, a table with the 10 Commandments. Among them, of course, was the inscription, "Thou shalt not steal." The church warden, 80-year-old Basil Harwood, just threw up his hands. Probably the thieves wanted to study the commandments better, but apparently they did not read them all. They took not only the frescoes, but also an old painting of Moses, and even an ordinary extension cord. Perhaps it just happened to be at hand, or maybe it was a sacred object. The police, of course, began an investigation, but the story itself is almost a joke, when reality makes a plot better than any script. Mysterious tomb in Israel. There are many places for pilgrimage on our planet, and each place has its own legend or history. So in Israel, archaeologists decided to explore the place of pilgrimage of early Christians. Many centuries ago, and to this day, it is believed that this is the tomb of a woman who was present at the birth of Christ. Well, the question is, did Christ's midwife ever exist? Not far from the ancient city of Lachish, 50 kilometers from Jerusalem, back in 1984, marauders found the tomb of Salome. 2,000 years ago, this cave was the burial place of a wealthy Jewish family. The cave consists of several chambers, in the walls of which burial niches are carved. In ancient times, the tomb was robbed by other marauders. Everything valuable was taken out of the tomb, the coffins were broken, and the remains of people were lying on the ground. The tomb is decorated with carvings and mosaics. Such a tomb is not unique, and archaeologists have found quite a few of these throughout Israel. In addition to skeletons, traces of the presence of people of the early Byzantine period were found here. The remains of oil lamps, which are associated with pilgrims. There were also many inscriptions on the walls, judging by the text they were left by believers. Some of the inscriptions were in Arabic. What could attract Christian pilgrims to the Jewish tomb? After analyzing the inscriptions on the walls, scientists came to the conclusion that a certain Salome, who was the midwife of Christ, was buried here. This woman is mentioned in pictures and in the Gospel of James. Archaeologists suggest that the name Salome could be carved on one of the ossuaries. Some of the early Christians familiar with the Gospel of James may have seen this and reported to others that they had found the tomb of a midwife holding the Christ child in her arms. To ensure the flow of pilgrims, such information is quite enough. No one will check whether the midwife of Jesus is really buried in this place. It is enough for people to simply say this and they already believe it. Ancient people today. An interesting conclusion about ancient people was made by Professor Gregory Fort from the University of Alberta. On the island of Florence in 2003, the remains of the Florentine man or Homo floresiensis were discovered. The approximate age of the two skeletons found here is about 100,000 years. Due to the different dating methods used, it is not yet possible to accurately determine the age. Professor Fort believes that ancient people can live on this island to this day. To prove his theory, the professor wrote his own book, which mentions the legend of the ape man and meets dialogues with representatives of the indigenous people. He believes that the local people really met the descendants of ancient people and even contacted them. Any lie or legend has a grain of truth. Therefore, we can conclude that the ancient people on this island either died out quite recently or still live there in our time. If the legend has a too illogical history, then most likely it has changed over time. People with every generation add something new or forget something. But meeting with people similar to monkeys is very real these days. Many of you know that there is a whole tribe living in the Indian Ocean who still knows nothing about technology. There have already been many videos about the Sentinelles on YouTube, and I have already talked about them in my past videos. That is, there is a precedent, and we can believe that the ancestors of ancient humanoid creatures still live on the island of Florence. The author of the book says that he has evidence of at least 30 eyewitnesses who contacted a creature similar to the Florence man. Locals consider hominins to be unintelligent creatures who practically do not speak the language of communication and do not possess any modern technologies, even the simplest ones. However, outwardly, they are very similar to people. Of course, eyewitness accounts for science cannot be considered proof of the existence of real people. But this is good food for thought, what I am always trying to convey to you. I want you to relax after watching the video and think a little before going to bed about what an amazing world it is and what an interesting history we have. Train with Nazi gold. The legend of the Nazi gold train is one of the most intriguing stories surrounding the end of World War II. According to this legend, in the last days of the war, when Nazi Germany stood on the verge of defeat, a train loaded with gold, jewelry, and works of art was sent from Breslau, now Wrocław, Poland, towards the Oven Mountain Range, where, according to rumors, there were underground warehouses and bunkers. This train is said to have disappeared without a trace in the chaos of the final days of the war, leaving behind many questions and speculation. Some versions claim that the train was hidden in one of the many tunnels in the oven area, the entrances and exits of which were then blown up or walled up to hide the treasure from the approaching Allied forces. For decades, treasure hunters, explorers, and historians have tried to find the lost train using both historical evidence and modern technology. Despite numerous expeditions and searches, no convincing evidence of the existence of the train was found. However, from time to time, new reports about possible finds appear in the media, once again reigniting interest in this mystery. When the Sahara was an ocean. Now it seems lifeless. Endless sand, sun-baked rocks, rare caravans. But once upon a time, millions of years ago, the Sahara was completely different. It was an ocean. The Tethys Ocean is huge, warm, inhabited by ancient creatures. Ammonites, sea urchins, corals, giant reptiles. All this lived where today, lizards barely survive. Under a layer of sand, imprints of seashells, layers of limestone, and fragments of coral are still preserved. Geologists have found traces of deltas, channels, coastlines, everything that says water once splashed here. But the ocean is gone, and in its place another story arose. Hundreds of thousands of years later, people settled on this land. Some of the most ancient, whose name still sounds through the sand, the Berbers, or as they call themselves, the Amazigh, descendants of those who survived the climate change, the disappearance of rivers, the drying up of lakes. They stayed when others left. Their rock paintings in Tassili and Ager are a real library of prehistoric consciousness. People hunting with bows, holidays, scenes of love and war. Even the image of creatures with rounded helmets seems to be from another reality. Some believe that this is an allegory, some believe it is evidence of contacts with another mind. But the essence is the same. When the Sahara was still breathing, the Berbers already knew how to tell their stories. They knew where to find water, how to survive when the days are hot and the nights are icy. They ruled Numidia, traded with Rome, fought with Egypt, and then they disappeared from the map, but not from the earth. The Arab conquests drove them out of the cities into the desert and mountains. But the culture survived. To this day, in remote villages, the Berber language is heard and memories that are thousands of years old live on. And in the desert itself, there are traces of a past that is much more ancient. Stone mushrooms. At first glance, they are just rocks. But if you look closely, the shape is striking. A massive cap of hard stone rests on a thin, corroded stem. These formations are the result of differential erosion. The wind, carrying sand, polishes the soft rocks for years, leaving the hard ones standing. Each such mushroom is like a timestamp. Temporary, but proud. Their legs gradually become thinner, and one day the cap will collapse. They live for hundreds, thousands of years, but they are still doomed, like the ocean, like civilizations. And only memory, in stones and pollen, in sand, survives everything. Are there other traces of this ancient civilization, and what can they tell us about the past that we still do not understand? Connection to ancient Egyptian priests. Among the many occult theories that interested the Nazis, the idea of ancient Egyptian priests occupied a special place. The leaders of the Third Reich, especially members of the Ahnenerbe, believed that ancient Egyptian priests possessed secret knowledge about the afterlife, magic, and power over death. This knowledge, in their opinion, could be used to achieve control over spiritual and physical forces, which would make the Nazis invincible. Nazi expeditions to Egypt, organized under the auspices of the Ahnenerbe, were aimed at finding ancient artifacts associated with the pharaohs and their rituals. Of particular interest was the cult of Osiris, the god of the afterlife and rebirth, symbolizing eternal life and strength. Osiris, as the patron of resurrection and the cycles of life, could, according to the Nazis, give them the key to immortality and control over the soul. The expeditions were supposed to find ancient texts and artifacts that could reveal the secrets of the priestly rites performed in the temples and pyramids. The Nazis were looking for magical objects such as wands, amulets, and sacred scrolls that could give them access to spiritual power using the magical rites of the ancient priests. Although no official evidence of successful finds or magical artifacts was ever presented, the Nazi elite believed that the ancient Egyptian priests possessed true knowledge about the nature of life and death. Storm reveals ancient ritual. In the spring, after a storm, a coastal cliff collapsed on the shore of the Baltic Sea. The lump of clay that fell down hid something inside that no one would have found without the help of nature itself. It had lain underground for almost 3,000 years and was in perfect condition. Length, 24 centimeters. Decorated with ornaments, stars, crescents, symbols reminiscent of the signs of the sun and moon. According to archaeologists, the weapon had ritual significance. It was probably used in ceremonies associated with the cult of the sun, and the ornaments correspond to the astral symbolism of the Bronze Age. The place of the find itself, a beach from which nothing could be predicted. Just clay, just a crumbling shore. And here it is, an object that had lain in the dark for 3 millennia, coming to light for just a few seconds before it could have been carried away by the water. Sometimes archaeology is not only excavations. This is when the earth itself chooses the moment to show you something important. The gods have lost their heads. An interesting find was discovered by archaeologists in the area of Roman bridges crossing the Penkaila stream and the tributary of the Rhindakos River. Archaeologists have found stone heads depicting Greek gods, Eros, Dionysus, the demigod Hercules, and several other gods from the Greek pantheon. In addition to these heads, a whole statue without one leg was found nearby. Aizanoi was founded as a Phrygian city on the western edge of the Phrygian kingdom. Throughout its history, this city has been under the influence of different peoples. In ancient times, the city was under the hegemony of the Pergamon and Bithynia kingdoms, and then in 133 BC, it came under the control of Rome. After the 7th century AD, Aizanoi fell into disrepair, and some buildings on the Temple Hill were turned into a citadel with the Chavdar Tatars during the Seljuk period. Who owns the statue more than 2 meters in height, scientists do not yet know. Whether this is a legendary hero or some kind of deity. In 2021, archaeologists found the head of Aphrodite and Dionysus here. And in 2020, a broken statue of Hercules was discovered. This place can be considered a real cemetery of ancient statues. Archaeologists have yet to find out why the gods lost their heads and where their stone bodies are. In addition to statues, blocks belonging to the bridge, a sundial, and fragments of other marble sculptures were found here in 2022. But if the ancient gods are fictional characters, then humanoid creatures are a reality, and there is an opinion that they still live with us on the same planet. Revolution in science. Sanskritologists consider this event a real revolution in science, and how this will affect the history of mankind I will tell further. The most famous sage of antiquity, Panini, was a poet and even a saint. Throughout his life, he traveled a lot and wrote a huge number of works and treatises, which, to varying degrees, influenced modern science. 2,500 years ago, Panini created a series of secret grammar rules that taught the correct pronunciation of words in ancient Sanskrit. For centuries, scientists from all over the world have tried to unravel this method. Sanskrit is a classical Indo-European language that originated in the Bronze Age in South Asia. Over time, it became the sacred language of the Hindus. The greatest scientific works on philosophy, mathematics, and history are written in this language. So that you understand how great this discovery is, then imagine that you cannot read. There are a huge number of books, magazines, advertising signs. You see it all, but you can't read a single word. And the method of reading Sanskrit, which was invented by Panini, allows you to read ancient scientific works as if they were in a language accessible to us, be it English or Spanish or any other language. To this day, this image is considered one of the greatest intellectual achievements in history. The Panini system includes 4,000 detailed rules that help decipher the ancient script. For 2,500 years, scholars have been misreading Sanskrit texts. As it turned out, at one stage of reading, several rules can be used at once, and which scientists could not understand. Therefore, most of the ancient texts have been completely misinterpreted. This is how one of the pages of Panini's text looks like, or rather its copy made in the 18th century. The sage had an extraordinary mind and invented a cipher that has no analogues in the history of mankind. His system does not need new ideas at all. The more scientists come up with them, the further from the truth they are. The key is simplicity, and for many years, specialists themselves complicated the way of reading Sanskrit. The Indian scientist Rishi Rajpopat hacked the meta-rule of the father of linguistics, Panini. Now you can withdraw absolutely any word in Sanskrit correctly. At all times and in any field of activity, there is one single rule. If the decision is very complex, then most likely it is wrong. I will not explain in detail how the text is deciphered and which rule applies in this or that case so that the video does not become boring. You can find all this on the net. I can only say that Rishi Rajpopat solved the puzzle in a few minutes. After that, for several years, he rechecked his discovery. And the solution to the problem that has baffled all scientists for centuries has been found. India's contribution to world science is gigantic. Now scientists can decipher the ancient texts that are already available and will definitely decipher the new ones that archaeologists will find. And the whole world will learn about the ancient Indian scientists, whom we have not even heard of before. In the meantime, I'll tell you about an interesting find in the Egyptian tombs. Lycurgus Cup. The Lycurgus Cup is a unique artifact of antiquity, combining high art and complex technical implementation. This Roman glass goblet dates back to the 4th century AD and serves as a striking example of the ancient craftsmanship of glassmaking. The peculiarity of the cup lies in its ability to change color under different lighting conditions. In reflected light, the cup appears green, but when illuminated, it takes on a rich ruby red hue. This effect is achieved thanks to gold and silver nanoparticles in the glass. The image on the cup is based on Greek mythology and tells the story of Lycurgus, who tried to kill Ambrosia, the son of the god of wine Dionysus. The image shows how the vines generated by the vineyard entangle the body of Lycurgus, making it impossible for him to move. The Lycurgus cup is now kept in the British Museum. It serves not only as a magnificent example of ancient art, but also as evidence of the high level of knowledge of ancient artisans in the fields of chemistry and optics. The secret the CIA knew. In 2002, declassified CIA documents were made public. One of them was simply called Noah's Ark Report. It mentions a strange object on the slope of Mount Ararat, a formation that looks like the hull of a huge ship. There have been rumors about this place since the middle of the 20th century. But here's what's strange. The CIA filmed it from reconnaissance aircraft. Then they connected satellites, all for the sake of this anomaly. According to the official version, nothing special was found in the pictures, but dozens of requests to publish the footage, especially for 1974, were rejected. Why hide the images if there is nothing in them? Later, researchers collected soil samples from this place. They contain marine organisms, but Mount Ararat is located at an altitude of 4,420 meters. Does this mean that water really was here? The same one from the biblical flood? It would seem like a coincidence, but there are too many such coincidences. For too long, people have been trying to avoid this place. The Holy Grail of the Nazis. This artifact has become increasingly popular over time, especially in the context of research into the esoteric beliefs of the Nazi regime. It is true that a number of senior Nazi leaders, including Himmler, were interested in the occult and mystical traditions. However, it is necessary to understand that most of the information on this topic is based on myths and guesses. However, there is a version that the Nazis were actually looking for the Holy Grail in the hope of using its mythical properties for their own purposes. In combination with archaeological expeditions organized by the Ahnenerbe SS Research Institute, this version becomes even more interesting. Some historians claim that one of the goals of Nazi expeditions to Tibet and other regions was to search for relics, including the Grail. However, there is no clear evidence for this. There is also an opinion that the Grail could be located in southern France, in the Cathar region, and that the Nazis carried out excavations there. This myth has been further inflated by popular culture, especially movies and books. A number of works depict Nazis pursuing sacred relics, including the Grail, to gain supernatural power or justify their ideology. Scientific and historical research on the topic proves that while the Nazis were indeed interested in the occult and mysticism, most of these claims are based on myth. However, the idea that the Nazis may have been searching for the Holy Grail has become one of the most recognizable and disturbing themes in modern pop culture. Crocodile heads in the tomb. The Theban necropolis, located on the western bank of the Nile opposite Thebes in Upper Egypt, was used in ancient times for the ritual burials of most pharaohs. During regular excavations in this place, Polish archaeologists found the heads of crocodiles in the tombs of Egyptian nobles. These were the tombs of Cheti, an important official during the reign of Pharaoh Nebuchadnezzar Mentuhotep II, and some anonymous high-ranking official. In these tombs, 9 crocodile heads were found wrapped in cloth. The heads were not mummified, as was common in ancient Egypt. The crocodiles belonged to the species Crocodilus niloticus, a large crocodile that lives in the fresh rivers of Africa. Unfortunately, the skulls of crocodiles were not complete. Somewhere was lacking a part of the jaw, somewhere a fragment of the skull. The first excavations in this place were carried out more than 50 years ago, and then the bones of animals were not so valued by archaeologists and researchers. And if the bones were found, they were simply thrown into one pile or burned. Then it was believed that there is no value in the bones of animals. It was much easier to find a mummy and sell it to collectors, or process it into flour and sell it as medicine. Gold jewelry has also been valued at all times. And who needs a crocodile skull that is thousands of years old? In ancient Egypt, crocodiles were an object of worship in the form of the god Sebek. Sebek is associated with the Nile or West African crocodile and is represented either entirely as a predator or as a man with the head of a crocodile. A fragrance that is 3,200 years old. Have you ever wondered how people smelled in ancient times? I don't mean human body odor, I'm talking about ancient perfumery. We have always been interested in what ancient people ate, what they were fond of, what they dreamed about. So why not find out how they smelled? With this, everything is much more complicated. The smell cannot remain for hundreds and thousands of years in the ground. However, scientists do not stand still and will always find a way to recreate the life of ancient people. Scientists from the Turkish Academy of Odors and the Aroma Culture Association have created a composition based on the formula of the famous perfumer of antiquity, a woman named Tapudi Balata Kalam. The formula by which the smell was created was found on cuneiform tablets during excavations in Assur, the capital of the ancient Assyrian city-state in modern-day Iraq. On these tablets, a step-by-step recipe for creating perfumes was written, which women loved very much 3,200 years ago. Taputi Balata Kalam used a combination of various flowers and oils, as well as calamus, cypress, myrrh, horseradish, spices, and balm to create her perfume. She mixed all the components with water and other solvents, used the distillation method as during the production of moonshine, after which she filtered the resulting liquid several times. Similar methods of perfume production are used today. However, in addition to the physical method of creating perfume, she was also guided by rituals. For example, she made her products exclusively under the full moon. But there are things that scientists have not been able to translate. By the word kirsu, the author of the recipe meant some kind of vessel. In fact, he too may have played a key role in the creation of the fragrance. The traditions of perfumery art in this territory are 8,000 years old, so archaeologists will have a lot of work to do to find that same ancient smell that fascinated men in antiquity. A pyramid that sunk before history. At the depth of 30 meters near the island of Yonaguni, there is a stone pyramid on the ocean floor. Smooth steps, terraces, arches, openings, everything looks as if it is a building and not random rocks. The age of the object is about 10,000 years. That is, it was built before the Sumerians, Egyptians, and the first cities. Scientists are still arguing. Some are sure that this is a trick of nature, while others consider Yonaguni to be evidence of a previously unrecognized civilization. If they are right, this could completely change our understanding of when and how human history began. What if this is not just an erroneous trace of nature, but a trace of some civilization? What if there is a history hidden under this ocean that we do not know? Witchcraft research. Project Hex is a mysterious project rumored to be connected to Nazi research into the occult and witchcraft. According to the stories, in one of the secret laboratories, the Nazis conducted experiments aimed at studying magic, ancient rituals, and supernatural powers. The project was allegedly inspired by the fascination of high-ranking officials of the Third Reich with the occult and the idea of searching for ancient knowledge to create powerful weapons. Recent archaeological discoveries in Eastern Europe have increased interest in this theory. Strange artifacts were found in an abandoned bunker that may indicate occult practices. Among the finds are ancient manuscripts describing witchcraft rituals, symbols related to Germanic Scandinavian mythology, and strange altar structures that were supposedly used in rituals. Items resembling magical amulets have also been found, suggesting that the Nazis were looking for ways to use magical powers for their own purposes. While many of these stories may have been exaggerated, the Nazis did have an interest in the occult, as evidenced by the activities of the Ahnenerbe, an organization that studied mysticism and ancient cults. 260-day calendar. How many days are there in a year? Anyone on our planet knows. But for most people, this number sounds like 365, and for the inhabitants of some parts of Mesoamerica, it is the number 260. As well as 3,000 years ago, these peoples use calendars in which there are 260 days a year. And just the other day, researchers found the earliest evidence that ancient stone structures were used to mark the seasons. With the help of LiDAR and aerial photography, archaeologists have discovered hundreds of architectural complexes that have been aligned to facilitate synchronized observations of the sunrise and sunset of the sun, moon, and other celestial objects in accordance with this 260-day cycle. This calendar was most likely invented based on the cycles of corn, growing, and human reproduction. The earliest documented evidence of the use of this calendar was a glyph depicting the 7 deer, one of the days of the calendar, as part of a 3rd century BC fresco in Guatemala. Unfortunately, these cultures did not leave written records of earlier periods, so it was difficult for scientists to prove that people used the 260-day cycle of the year until archaeologists found the stone remains of a giant calendar. Judging by the size of this structure, it was of great importance to the Olmecs, Maya, and other cultures of that time, at least during the period when corn cultivation became widespread in the region. Excavating in the impenetrable jungle is a very difficult task, so aerial photography with LiDAR has become a real miracle for archaeologists. Thanks to such opportunities, researchers can know in advance where to conduct their excavations. In addition to the stone calendar, experts have found many other buildings, pyramids, and temples. And soon in my next videos, I will definitely talk about them. In the meantime, we will go to Israel where, according to archaeologists, they found the tomb of the midwife of Christ. History that is not in textbooks. Not long ago, archaeologists found evidence that in ancient Troy, long before the Iliad was written, they were already drinking wine. This is not just a theory or a guess, but real chemical evidence that confirmed that even ordinary people in the territory of Troy not only drank wine, but also used it in everyday life. For researchers, this was a sensation, since in ancient times only the elite could usually afford the luxury of drinking wine, but in Troy it was available to all levels of society. Research has shown that the cult of wine was so important to the inhabitants of Troy that vessels in which it was drunk were found throughout the city, from rich palaces to simple residential areas. But what is even more interesting, the fermentation method used in Troy was so unique that it resembles more complex and advanced civilizations of that time. And now, thanks to this research, we can confidently say Troy was not just a legend. It was real, and its culture was much more complex and progressive than we could imagine. The quest for the silver spear. The Spear of Longinus, also known as the Spear of Destiny, is one of the most famous and mystical artifacts in history. According to Christian legend, this is the spear with which the Roman legionary Longinus pierced the side of the crucified Jesus Christ. Many legends claim that this artifact has great magical powers and that its owner can rule the world and gain unlimited power. The Nazi leadership, especially Adolf Hitler, were confident in the power of the Spear of Destiny. Hitler first saw it in his youth in a Vienna museum and was so impressed that he later called this moment a turning point in his life. Many great rulers of the past, such as Charlemagne and Napoleon, were believed to have owned this spear, which supposedly helped them achieve their great achievements. Hitler was confident that if he took possession of the Spear of Longinus, it would ensure him not only victory in war, but also domination of the world. When the Nazis came to power, the search for the Spear of Destiny became part of their program to collect ancient artifacts that could strengthen their influence and power. Secret research conducted within the Antiqua organization was aimed at finding both Christian relics and other ancient objects with magical or religious powers. The Spear of Longinus was considered the key to the success of the entire Nazi project. In 1938, after the Anschluss of Austria, Hitler ordered the immediate transfer of the Spear of Destiny from the museum in Vienna to Nuremberg, where it was placed in a special room for study and storage. During the following years of the war, the Nazis continued to search for the original spear, fearing that the spear found in Vienna might be a copy and not the real thing. The Antiqua went all over Europe looking for traces of other relics associated with the spear. It was believed that the spear might have been lost or hidden during the Crusades, and the Nazis actively studied ancient maps and texts to find at least some traces. Secret missions were sent to the most remote corners of Europe and the Middle East, trying to find clues that could lead to the real spear. The fate of the Spear of Longinus remains one of the mysteries of World War II. After the capture of Nuremberg in 1945, the artifact was found in the city's treasury and handed over to American troops. However, there is still debate about whether this spear is genuine or one of the many replicas created in the Middle Ages. Some researchers believe that the true Spear of Destiny has never been found and is still in one of the secret places, waiting for its new owner. What changed the earthquake in Lisbon? On November 1, 1755, Lisbon was rocked by one of the most destructive earthquakes in European history. The force of nature hit the city with unexpected power, causing tsunamis and endless fires that intensified the destruction. The epicenter of the earthquake, estimated at magnitude 8.5, 9.0 on the Richter scale, was located in the Atlantic Ocean near the Portuguese coast. The earthquake occurred in the morning when most residents were preparing to celebrate All Saints' Day, adding mystique to this terrible event. The destruction in Lisbon was colossal. About 85% of the city's buildings were destroyed, including important religious, historical, and public buildings. The victims of the disaster were, according to various estimates, from 10,000 to 100,000 people. Many died under the rubble, others were killed by the tsunami that reached the coast shortly after the earthquake. Many believers viewed the earthquake as God's punishment for the sins of mankind. This belief led to massive religious processions and public confessions in hopes of appeasing heaven. On the other hand, this event prompted some philosophers and scientists to think about the natural causes of such disasters, which contributed to the development of a scientific approach to the study of earthquakes. The restoration of Lisbon was taken under the control of the Marquis of Pombal, Prime Minister of Portugal, who took decisive and innovative measures. Pombal organized the construction of the new city using earthquake-resistant structures and strategic urban planning, which included wide, straight streets and earthquake-resistant buildings. These measures not only helped quickly rebuild the city, but also laid the foundation for modern urban planning methods. The impact of the Lisbon earthquake on the development of natural disaster response techniques has been profound. The Marquis of Pombal's approaches to disaster management and infrastructure restoration became the basis for modern emergency management techniques. His actions demonstrate the importance of responding quickly to crises, as well as learning from the past to minimize losses in the future. Despite significant efforts and achievements, many aspects of the Lisbon earthquake remain shrouded in mystery. Questions about the exact causes, mechanisms of the earthquake, and its long-term consequences for geology and society continue to concern scientists. These unsolved mysteries maintain scientific interest and stimulate continued research in seismology and civil protection. A shelter in the jungle. Imagine a group of people leasing a part of the Amazon for 1,000 years, including not only the land, but also the airspace and even natural resources. This is not a movie plot, but the real story of the Kailash Nation, a self-proclaimed state created by a fugitive guru accused of kidnapping and violence. He proclaimed himself the pontiff of Hinduism and fled India, declaring the new island his sovereign state. In 2024, his followers began to make agreements with the tribes of Bolivia, promising aid and money. One of the communities, the Baure, signed a 25-year agreement. But then it turned out that the documents included a lease term of 1,000 years. When this was revealed, an international scandal began. The Bolivian authorities arrested the participants, canceled all agreements, and expelled the ringleaders. But a troubling thought remains. If someone can come along with money and try to rent the Amazon, who's next? This isn't a story about cultists, it's a story about how weakness in the face of resources can result in the loss of an entire territory. Nazi gold in the Alpine Lakes. Legends of Nazi gold hidden in the depths of the Alpine Lakes at the end of World War II have haunted the minds of explorers, treasure hunters, and historians for many years. In its final days, the Third Reich was rumored to have sent valuable cargo, including gold, gems, and works of art, into these inaccessible areas in an attempt to hide them from advancing Allied forces. One of the most famous stories is the alleged Nazi storage of significant gold reserves in the lakes of Austria, in particular Lake Toplitz. According to legend, the Nazis used this and other mountain lakes as natural repositories for their treasures, drowning boxes of gold and valuables in the hope of preserving them for the future revival of the Reich. The post-war search for Nazi gold attracted many expeditions, some of which confirmed the presence of artifacts from the era in the waters of the lakes, including counterfeit British pounds produced by the Nazis as part of Operation Bernhard. However, most of the declared treasures were never found, which only fuels interest in this topic. There are many theories about why the Nazis might have chosen the Alpine Lakes to hide their treasures. One of them is that the mountainous terrain and deep cold waters of the lakes provided ideal conditions for preserving valuables for a long time. In addition, legends about treasures could serve as disinformation, the purpose of which was to distract the Allies from more important tasks. Merer's Diary. In 2013, archaeologists Pierre Tallet and Gregory Marouard discovered papyrus scrolls at the site of an ancient harbor on the Red Sea coast, which are the oldest known documents. Dating back to the 27th year of Khufu's reign, these records were created by workers directly involved in the construction of the pyramid. Among them are ledgers describing the distribution of resources: bread, beer, grain, and meat to feed 20,000 workers. An even more unique find was the diary of Inspector Merer, who led a team of 200 people. The diary describes in detail the process of transporting limestone blocks from the quarries of Tura to Giza. These blocks used to clad the pyramid were transported along the Nile in wooden boats during the annual flood. Each boat could hold up to 80 tons of stone, and Merer's crew managed to make 2 or 3 trips per 10-day week, transporting around 1,000 blocks per season. Particularly notable is the mention of the noble Ankaf, Khufu's half-brother, who oversaw the construction of the pyramid. The diary also records for the first time the original name of the pyramid, Akhet Khufu, which translates as Horizon of Khufu. These records confirm the existence of a complex infrastructure, including canals, harbors, and storage facilities. The workers not only transported materials, but also built ports and managed resources. The archives were likely buried in Wadi al-Jarf after Khufu's death, when work was suspended. Egyptologists consider these discoveries key to understanding how the ancient Egyptians were able to build some of the most impressive structures in human history. They froze and survived death. Northern Yakutia is one of the few regions on the planet where the past has not collapsed but has been preserved. Permafrost prevents bodies from decomposing. It preserves them as if death had simply paused life. This was the find of 2018, a foal that died about 42,000 years ago. It had all its internal organs, skin, muscles, even blood. Real blood thickened in the vessels, but after defrosting it became liquid again. Instantly, it became a worldwide sensation. Analysis showed that the animal lived in the boreal steppes, which have long since disappeared. In fact, it became a portal to a past ecosystem. Another case is a woolly rhinoceros found in Kalaima. It is about 47,000 years old. Its stomach has been preserved, and inside it is plant pollen. wormwood, cereals, wild herbs. Even after thousands of years, you can determine what it ate and what the landscape around it looked like. These are not just remains. This is ancient flora imprinted in the animal's body. And in 2018, they found the head of a Pleistocene wolf. Even the brain was preserved in its entirety. This happens extremely rarely, especially after tens of thousands of years. Researchers were able to study its structure. The age is about 1.5 years. The animal has not yet reached maturity. All these finds have one thing in common. They are more alive than they should be. This is not just archaeology, it is almost biology. And Yakutia in this sense is a unique laboratory where time is in no hurry to disappear. Ancient Roman tombstone of a sausage seller. Nowadays, there are a lot of unusual tombstones. Sometimes people approach it with a great sense of humor. It happens that the deceased was an important person and his grave stands out from the others. In a cemetery near the Appian Way, near Rome, archaeologists have found a modest marble tombstone from the 4th century AD. The epitaph reads, "Alexander, a sausage seller in the market. He lived for 30 years, he was kind and a friend to everyone. Let him rest in virtue." This tablet is one of the most common for those times. However, even here we can reflect on the depth and meaning of what was written. Let's try to explain. Everything I say is just guesswork, and there is no exact proof of my words. Judging by the image of the menorah, Alexander most likely professed Judaism. Whether he was a Jew is difficult to say. If he was, then definitely not by his father, because his name would have been different. But there is an opinion that it was not a real name. Maybe that's the name he used for some of the customers. Judging by the text, the tombstone and the inscription on it were ordered by those people who were engaged in his funeral. They were definitely not relatives. If it were a wife, children, or parents, the text would be different. According to ancient Roman tradition, the exact age of the deceased was indicated on the tombstone. Not only lived years, but also months and even days. This means that those who buried him were not close enough to him to know the exact date of birth. Therefore, the age of 30 years could be indicated approximate. And one cannot exclude the fact that Alexander could have come here to work while his family remained at home and does not even suspect what happened to him. The shape of the headstone is also interesting. Usually they were rectangular in shape, but it's the shape of a circle. Either they wanted to single him out in the cemetery or it symbolized the shape of the sausage in a cut. Therefore, most likely his funeral was carried out by employees of the market where he worked. This is how the story turned out. I often tell you that one find can draw a whole legend. This is a man who just sold sausage hundreds of years ago, and now hundreds of thousands of people will learn about him in 2023. What kind of memory will we leave behind? The city that shouldn't exist. In the south of modern Iraq, amidst the sun-scorched land, lie the ruins of Eridu. Once upon a time, canals flowed here, artisans worked, and fields were irrigated according to a precisely calculated system. Recent research has shown that Eridu is not just an ancient city, it may be the very first city on Earth. According to satellite data, archaeologists have found more than 4,000 canals and about 700 farms located according to a strictly organized scheme. Canals up to 9 kilometers long, an extensive irrigation network, infrastructure that could not have been built by disparate tribes. It required engineers, workers, a management system. And all this, thousands of years before the Sumerians, Egyptians, and Akkadians appeared. The strangest thing is that the region was abandoned, and therefore this entire ancient system has survived almost intact. It's as if our modern city were buried under ash, and someone found it whole 6,000 years later. Eridu is mentioned in the Sumerian king list as the first city to be granted kingship from heaven. When myth and geodesy coincide, it gets a little creepy. The Amber Room. The Amber Room, one of the greatest wonders of the world, is often described as the eighth wonder of the world. Originally created in the early 18th century for the Kingdom of Prussia, it was presented to Peter the Great in 1716 as a sign of the Russian-Prussian alliance. Subsequently, the room was transported to St. Petersburg and installed in the Catherine Palace in Tsarskoye Selo. Made from several tons of amber, it was a masterpiece of decorative art, decorated with gold leaf and mirrors, creating a warm, luminous interior. During World War II, when Nazi troops captured Tsarskoye Selo, the Amber Room was dismantled and transported to Königsberg, now Kaliningrad, Russia, where it was exhibited in a museum. After the war, traces of the room were lost, and its location remains one of the greatest mysteries of the 20th century. For decades, explorers, historians, and treasure hunters have tried to find the Amber Room. There are various theories about its fate. Some claim that it was destroyed during the bombing. Others believe that it is still hidden in the bowels of the earth or in closed vaults. In 2003, the reconstruction of the Amber Room was completed in Russia, recreated by craftsmen from drawings and photographs of the original, which became a symbol of the restoration of lost cultural value. There is more to the quest for the Amber Room than just the quest to find lost treasure. It is a journey through history, culture, and international relations, reflecting humanity's endless desire to reconnect with the past and pass it on to future generations. 2,000-year-old cemetery in Siberia. In Krasnoyarsk, Russia, workers were raking a mound and found old skeletons. It turned out that it was not just a hill, but a barrow, and there was a burial chamber underground. Approximate age of human remains is 2,000 years, and the most interesting thing is that they belong to a previously unknown culture. According to archaeologists, the culture was similar to the Scythians, whose numerous remains were found in the Crimea. Next to the skeletons, archaeologists found ritual weapons and artifacts. Based on these objects, it was possible to understand that the burial does not belong to the Tagar culture. There were no such artifacts in the culture of these people. Perhaps it was some kind of people from the Scythian group. Most of all, there were similarities only with them. A few years ago, one interesting burial was already found in Siberia, which is also about 2,000 years old. In Ust-Polui, then they found the burial of 5 dogs. They were buried with honors. This indicates that dogs for people in ancient times were not just pets. Not every person was buried in the place allotted for this, and even more so with expensive jewelry. While archaeologists in Siberia are trying to study ancient burials, scientists on the other side of the world have managed to solve an ancient grammatical puzzle. The gate through which death passed. On the southwestern coast of Sicily, archaeologists have unearthed not just ruins, but a completely forgotten fragment of an ancient city. 3-meter walls, gates, cemeteries, workshops, all of this belonged to the ancient Greek Selinunte. Recently, the northern gate, through which processions to the necropolises passed, was discovered. They led to 5,000 burials, from simple burials to rich crypts. And all of this stood on the most vulnerable border of the city. Apparently, ritual and vulnerability were connected. According to Diodorus Siculus, it was from here that the troops of Carthage burst into the city. The battle lasted 10 days and 16,000 defenders of Selinunte died. The site of the battle is right there, underfoot, and nearby are cemeteries where they were possibly buried. It is amazing how much has been preserved. Ovens, fragments of ceramics, the remains of craft workshops, wine warehouses. The scale and density of the finds make it clear that the city lived, traded, ritualized death, and suffered. And now, 2,500 years later, it is slowly returning to the surface. Silver Treasure, SS Gyrsapa. The silver treasure of the SS Gyrsapa has become one of the most significant underwater finds of our time, turning into a real sensation in the world of treasures and underwater exploration. The British merchant ship SS Gyrsapa was sunk by a German submarine in February 1941 during World War II while en route from India to Britain, carrying valuable cargo, including huge quantities of silver. At war and suffering from metal shortages, Britain at the time actively used sea routes to transport raw materials and valuables from its colonies. The Gyrsapa was carrying over 200 tons of silver bullion, intended to finance the war effort and support the country's economy. The sinking of the ship was a blow to Britain's resources. The wreckage of Gyrsapa was discovered in 2011 at a depth of more than 4.7 kilometers in the North Atlantic, which was made possible thanks to modern technologies for searching and studying underwater objects. The silver recovery operation proved extremely difficult due to depth, weather conditions, and technical limitations. However, it was successfully carried out and most of the silver was recovered. King or Demon? The Leeds Museum of Knightly Arms houses a strange artifact. It was clearly not created for battle. It has horns, a toothy grin, and a bristly chin. It does not look like a warrior's helmet, but a jester's mask. But, judging by the documents, this helmet belonged to Henry VIII. Yes, that same one of the most powerful and controversial monarchs of England. The helmet was part of the armor presented by Emperor Maximilian I in honor of the military alliance. It was made by the famous gunsmith Süssenhofer. The engraving was done by a jeweler from Augsburg. That is, we are not talking about some kind of farce. This was an official gift, made to order with the highest level of craftsmanship. Why does a king need such a face? There are many versions, from a theatrical ceremonial image to esoteric symbolism. Maybe this is an allegory, a demon into which power turns, or maybe just a specific sense of humor. But what's interesting is that the entire set of armor has disappeared. Only this helmet remains, and perhaps it is precisely because of its strange, frightening appearance that it has survived the centuries. 3 amazing artifacts. Archaeologists have made a discovery that could change our understanding of the history of ancient Egypt. The lost tomb of Pharaoh Thutmose II was recently found, an event comparable to the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922. However, unlike the famous Golden Boy tomb, the tomb of Thutmose II was badly damaged. After the pharaoh's death, the room was flooded and most of the relics were probably moved to another location. One of the key artifacts is fragments of alabaster vessels decorated with the name of Thutmose II. These duck-shaped vessels were used in rituals and testified to the high status of their owner. The inscription on them helped confirm that the tomb did indeed belong to this pharaoh. Another important find is fragments of paintings that fell from the ceiling and walls. The researchers found that the ceiling was once painted blue and dotted with stars, and the walls were decorated with texts from the Book of Amduat, an ancient Egyptian text that tells of the journey of the sun god Ra in the afterlife. Such images were only found in the tombs of pharaohs and close nobles. Another artifact found was a wooden rod that could have been part of a spear or a ceremonial fan used for fanning the pharaoh. The shaft bears an inscription with the title of the king, which became further evidence that the tomb belonged to Thutmose II. Mermaid from India. Not many people have heard of the archaeological site of Chandraketugarh in India, which is located about 35 kilometers from Kolkata. Chandraketugarh was a prosperous port city involved in international trade where people lived since 400 BC before 1250 AD. Today, only the ruins of a brick Buddhist temple from the 10th century remain on this site. Interest in Chandraketugarh arose due to the many terracotta artifacts dating back to the Shunga period, that is 200–100 BC. Most of them were stolen and taken abroad, and only a few fragments survived in Indian museums. Although the complex was discovered in 1906, the Archaeological Survey of India under British control did not carry out excavations here. Many of the stolen items are now in museums around the world, such as the Metropolitan. 2 terracotta plates depict a mermaid, a rather rare image in Indian culture. In one, a mermaid swims by a lake, holding something that looks like a mirror or a flower. People on the shore look at her as if she was a miracle. The great chief arrived in a chariot to see this creature. On another, a mermaid was caught in a net by fishermen. People wave at her and she answers them without showing any fear. Looking at these reliefs, I wondered, are they not a reflection of ancient legends or real events that took place in Chandraketugarh 2,200 years ago? Perhaps mermaids were not a figment of the imagination, but real sea creatures in ancient times? Write in the comments under the video. Do you believe in the existence of mermaids or something similar? It's no wonder that the depths of the seas and oceans have not yet been explored. Mysterious mask. A strange iridium artifact found in Florida challenges traditional ideas about ancient civilizations. According to researchers, this object is 12,000 years old and is made of iridium, a metal that is extremely rare on Earth and most often found in meteorites. The artifact is striking in its delicacy and skillful processing, which suggests that the ancient craftsmen had technologies that were significantly ahead of their time. An image is engraved on the surface of the object, reminiscent of the deity Viracocha, known in the Inca culture as the creator of all things. According to legend, Viracocha came from Lake Titicaca, bringing light and knowledge. This image may be evidence of a connection between ancient peoples and an extraterrestrial civilization, which would explain the use of rare meteorite material to create this artifact. Historians believe that this object was stolen by Spanish conquistadors in 1715 and taken away on the ship La Concepcion. The ship sank in a storm, leaving much of its cargo, including other artifacts, on the ocean floor. The mask washed up on the beach and is believed by experts to be just a small part of the $5 billion lost treasure. the tomb that they tried to steal. Summer 2023, Abkhazia, Markel settlement, an ordinary plot of land and a destroyed ancient crypt. It was broken into by looters. The robbers tried to take away a bronze situla but were caught on the spot. The owner of the land took the artifact and called archaeologists. What they found amazed even seasoned specialists. The crypt of the 3rd century BC turned out to be a real golden tomb. 70 items made of pure gold, plaques, beads, elements of clothing and jewelry. Rosettes, flowers, lunuli, twisted threads, foil, the finest work with almost jewelry precision. In some places, the gold resembled the Scythian Sarmatian style, in other elements, an antique influence. Perhaps these are the works of local craftsmen who worked at the intersection of cultures and trade routes. Archaeologists even found the remains of sacrificial animals, traces of a ritual important for the burial of a noble person. Judging by the artifacts, bones, glass beads, bronze bracelets, the deceased was not just rich, he was a representative of the elite, perhaps a priest or a chieftain. The irony is that the crypt was destroyed not by time or nature, but by people, the same as those who once built it. Laurentius Library. The legend of the Laurentius Library, collected in the Middle Ages and containing rare manuscripts and magical texts, is shrouded in mystery and myth. According to legend, this library was stolen by the Nazis during World War II and hidden in one of the German castles. The Nazis, fascinated by the occult and ancient knowledge, actively searched for artifacts and ancient texts that could give them access to supernatural powers. It is believed that the Laurentius Library included manuscripts on alchemy, astrology, and magical rituals, as well as ancient treatises on power and secret knowledge passed down through the centuries. Recent discoveries in one of the Bavarian castles, allegedly connected with Nazi occult projects, have reawakened interest in this legend. Several ancient manuscripts were discovered in underground storage facilities, which may be part of the lost library. The texts found include ancient treatises in Latin and Greek, as well as mysterious notes containing alchemical formulas and symbols. Most of these texts have still not been found, and the location of the remaining books remains unknown. The discovery of these ancient artifacts continues to cause controversy among historians and archaeologists. But one thing is clear: the Nazis' desire to possess ancient knowledge was serious and deeply thought out. The oldest map of the world has been deciphered. The British Museum has revealed the secret of one of the oldest maps of the world, a clay tablet from Babylon, created about 3,000 years ago. The so-called Imago Mundi, found in the city of Abu Haba, Sippar, in Iraq, has been kept in the museum's collection since 1882. The tablet depicts a simplified whole world as imagined by the inhabitants of Mesopotamia. The center is occupied by a rectangle of the Euphrates River. Around it are circles and rectangles denoting cities, including Babylon. Everything is surrounded by a bitter river, the salty waters of the Persian Gulf, and the Mediterranean Sea. According to cuneiform specialist Irving Finkel, this is a schematic reflection of the space where people lived and died, and beyond it, according to the tablet, there were 8 remote regions. The Akkadian text on the top and back of the map tells the story of the creation of the world and recounts one version of the story of the Great Flood. According to it, around 1800 BC, God commanded King Utnapishtim to build an ark, the remains of which were supposedly left behind a bitter river on a mountainside. A missing fragment of the tablet, discovered in 1995, helped scientists decipher the story more accurately. In addition, the Babylonian god Marduk is mentioned, as well as fantastic creatures such as the Scorpion Man and the lion-headed bird Anzu, confirming the rich mythological world of the Babylonians. Ancient Roman safe chest. In 1994, in central Spain, next to the ancient Roman temple of Mithra, archaeologists found the ruins of the Villa Casa del Mitreo. Built at the end of the 1st century, it was rebuilt several times before a major fire in the 4th century. Particular attention was drawn to a large wooden chest, bound with copper and iron plates. In ancient Rome, such chests served as safes for storing valuables. The chest measures about 3 by 1.5 meters, making it the largest such find. Due to the poor condition of the chest, which was damaged in a fire, archaeologists did not dare to remove it in 1994 for fear of destruction. The chest was left in place, awaiting better times and technologies to preserve it. This is a common practice in archaeology when the safety of an artifact cannot be guaranteed. In 2017, thanks to new technologies, the chest was removed and delivered to the Institute of Cultural Heritage of Spain. Here it was stabilized and preserved. There is no information about the contents of the chest. Most likely, the owners saved valuable things before the destruction of the villa. Melted steps. The stairs at the Temple of Hathor in Dendera raise many questions among archaeologists and researchers. These steps, located in one of the best-preserved temples of ancient Egypt, look as if they were exposed to incredibly high temperatures, which could have led to their deformation and partial melting. The surface of the steps shows unusual bends and recessed areas that are not typical for the normal wear of stone structures. There are various theories to explain this phenomenon. One hypothesis suggests that the steps could have been damaged as a result of some unknown thermal impact, for example, ritual fires or processes associated with ancient technologies. Another theory points to possible construction errors. If the stones for the steps were formed directly on site from a liquid solution, then the interruption of the hardening process could have led to an irregular shape and softness of the material. Scientists are still studying this phenomenon, adding another mystery to the rich heritage of ancient Egypt. Ruins of a Minoan structure. During the construction of a new airport in Crete, archaeologists discovered a unique round structure with a diameter of about 48 m, about 4,000 years old. The Greek Ministry of Culture called the discovery extremely interesting. The building with an area of 1,800 sqm refers to the Bronze Age Minoan civilization, which existed on Crete from 3000 to 1450 BC. The Minoans were a highly advanced society known for their maritime trade and art. Experts believe that the building was used mainly in 2000 to 1700 BC, when the first palaces were built on Crete, such as Knossos and Fest. The exact purpose of the structure is unknown, but the animal bones found indicate the possibility of ritual ceremonies, including sacrifices. The interior space was divided into several halls and surrounded by 8 stepped stone walls, 1.7 m high. The dimensions and complex layout indicate the social significance of the building, which required significant labor and special knowledge. The mysterious Harpy. The Queen of the Night relief, created around 1800 BC, is one of the most enigmatic artifacts of Mesopotamia. Also known as the Burney relief, it depicts a winged goddess with bird claws instead of feet, standing on the backs of 2 lions. On either side of her are owls, symbolizing power over the darkness of the night and the spirit world. The identity of the depicted goddess remains a subject of debate. Some researchers believe that this is Ishtar, Inanna, the Babylonian goddess of love, war, and fertility. Others suggest that the relief depicts Ereshkigal, the dark mistress of the underworld, Ishtar's sister. The symbolism of the relief indicates the power and supernatural strength of the goddess. The relief was probably a cult object associated with religious rituals or magical practices. Its rich detail and monumentality speak to the importance of the depicted deity in the beliefs of the era. Today, this artifact is kept in the British Museum. Medieval female giant. In the Middle Ages, on the island of Ostrów Lednicki in Poland, there lived a woman of extraordinary height who probably suffered from mental disorders. This is the only known giantess from Poland at that time, as confirmed by Dr. Magdalena Matzak. Her height was about 215 centimeters, while ordinary women were around 1.6 meters tall. The woman passed away at the age of 30. Her skeleton was found by researchers in the Lednice area. According to assumptions, the presence of such a disease could be accompanied by mental problems. Interestingly, despite her height, the life of a giantess in medieval Poland could have been quite comfortable since she was well known in her community. But her burial was unusual. Contrary to accepted traditions, her face was directed to the west, and she did not have funerary objects. The Forgotten Stone. In the heart of Lebanon, not far from the ancient temple complex of Baalbek, lies one of the largest processed stone blocks in history. This giant monolith, known as the Forgotten Stone, is impressive in size, 19.6 meter long, 6 meter wide, and at least 5.5 meters high. Its weight is estimated at around 1,500 tons, the equivalent of 200 African elephants. Some researchers believe that the stone was intended for an even grander structure than Baalbek itself. However, for unknown reasons, it was never delivered to the construction site. The Baalbek temple complex, famous for its colossal megaliths, was built during the Roman rule in the first 3rd centuries AD. However, the mysterious platforms of giant blocks, including the famous Trilithon, could have appeared much earlier. Who were the ancient builders who processed and attempted to move such massive stones? Perhaps Baalbek is the legacy of an older and more highly developed civilization, the traces of which remain unsolved. The oldest animation in history. If you thought before that animation was invented in the 19th to 20th century, then you are mistaken. Archaeologists have found something similar to the animation, and this artifact is about 5,200 years old. A unique vase was discovered in 1967, but the image on it could only be seen now. At the Burnt City, an archaeological site in southeastern Iran, researchers have found a goblet with scorched red sketches of a jumping goat that comes to life when the vase is spun. To be precise, in 5 consecutive images, the horned goat is jumping up and down. Researchers believe that in this way he is trying to eat leaves from the Assyrian tree of life. At least it looks like that when you twist the vase. You can see this vase in the National Museum of Iran. Persian potters in ancient times were fascinated by the movement of animals and came up with such animation to capture this event. Thus, the first animation in history appeared. While in the territory of ancient Iran, they tried to capture a goat in motion. In Germany, people in ancient times used the wishing well. The monster that couldn't handle change. In the Miocene Amazon, 8 million years ago, there swam a predator that was closer in size to a dinosaur than to modern reptiles. Purosaurus, a giant crocodile 15-16 meters long. Almost 2 saltwater crocodiles stacked on top of each other. Weight, 10 tons. Bite pressure, 11 tons per square inch. That's almost 3 times more than a Tyrannosaurus. It could crush a turtle shell the size of a Volkswagen. But Purosaurus didn't hunt near the shore like modern crocodiles. It leapt vertically out of the water like a killer whale and grabbed its prey, giant fish, snakes, and even mammals. It wasn't just a hunter, it was a machine of destruction in the water. Other crocodiles shared the space with him, such as the duck-billed Morasuchus. It seems the ecosystem was so rich that even monsters found a place to live. But it all ended when geography changed. The Isthmus of Panama blocked the oceans, the rivers of the Amazon became shallow, the climate became drier, and Purosaurus disappeared, as did everything he ate. Today, his relatives are the dwarf caimans. They survived, but the giant did not, because strength means nothing if the world around you disappears. We are missing something. We find mummies that are still bleeding after 40,000 years, stone terraces built before civilizations, minerals that existed only once, cities, canals, helmets, artifacts. All of this was lying in the ground, gathering dust in museums, or lurking underwater. Some of these we cannot explain, others we explain, but too confidently. The amazing is nearby. Sometimes it is the storm that gets it, sometimes the frost, sometimes an accident. But each such fragment seems to repeat the same question. What if everything was not as we think? What if history is not a straight line but a jagged trace in the sand, part of which has already been washed away? We are looking for answers, but maybe it's time to learn to notice the questions. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Bye everyone.